Greetings, everyone. This is John Contouris, Greek-American journalist. I'm coming to you live from Los Angeles with a very interesting as well as critical report with regards to the release of a certain portion of the JFK assassination files, which have been kept a secret for decades and decades by the FBI and by each successive U.S. government. Already, the U.S. government, and I'm about to show all this to you on the screen here, started releasing a lot of the JFK assassination files, okay, this past July, okay? So, what you need to do is go into Google, type in JFK National Archives FBI. The first link, from the nationalarchives.gov, okay? So, here's what we read. JFK Assassination Records, 2017 additional documents release. The National Archives and Records Administration is releasing documents previously withheld in accordance with the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act. The vast majority of the collection, 88%, has been open in full and released to the public since the late 1990s. The records at issue are documents previously identified as assassination records but withheld in full or withheld in part. The release consists of 3,810 documents, including 441 formerly withheld in full documents and 3,369 documents formally released with portions redacted. The documents originate from FBI and CIA series identified by the Assassination Records Review Board and Assassination Records. More releases will follow, okay? And here it talks about accessing the release files, okay? So you can click on all these links here. Let's go back. Okay, go down all of these here. Here's another one, same website, archives.gov, July the 25th this year. The President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection, okay? Here we go. Let's see here. The JFK was killed November the 22nd, 1963. Almost 30 years later, Congress enacted the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992. The act mandated that all assassination-related material be housed in a single collection in the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA. The resulting collection consists of more than 5 million pages of assassination-related records, photographs, motion pictures, we're going to get into that too, sound recordings, and artifacts. Approximately 2,000 cubic feet of records. Interesting. Most of the records are open for research. Most of them. However, there's still a lot that aren't open for research. So, we are GreekNewsOnDemand.com. That is the name of my Greek news website, GreekNewsOnDemand.com. That is one word. Please visit our site today to read all of our articles, particularly on the whole charade with the Vegas shooting, which was completely staged by the government and so on and so forth. There are no dead bodies. There's no blood, none of that crap. There's so much video evidence out there that proves it. I mean, it's just ridiculous. All you got to do is Google to see if there are any dead bodies or blood on Google, and there are none. I mean, doesn't that tell you anything? So, you can find me on Facebook. Here I am, John Contouris. Please check me out there. You can send me a friend request there. So, what I'd like to do is go over an article that I published, okay, for Greek media back on the 30th of August this year. And it has to do with an article for the Globe. And here's the cover. FBI boss J. Edgar Hoover killed Kennedy. Okay? Now, there are some new records that are about to be released. Okay? There's some new records that are about to be released with regards to the whole of all of these records, okay, that are on file at the National Archives with regards to the JFK assassination. However, there's still a major portion which they have not shown us. Okay? And that has to do with exactly this report that I did for Greek media back on the 30th of August. Now, what I'd like to do is skip up here a little bit. Let me just skip up here. And so I just like to show you some excerpts. I also have some screenshots here that I can show you. So basically, if you just check out the video, you can find it on my channel. You'll be able to see all the screenshots and so on and so forth. So here's the full cover. Now, we all know that the tabloids are a lot more trustworthy than, of course, mainstream news media. Tabloids are much, much more trustworthy than Fox News, and then, of course, CNN and all the rest of the mainstream news propaganda channels. So here's the full cover, and here's some excerpts here. So basically, let's read a little bit of this. I think it is still readable. Desperate to hold on to power by any means necessary, ruthless FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover killed President John F. Kennedy when his plot to blackmail the Commander-in-Chief by exposing sex tapes and mafia connections backfired, and he was ordered to resign. That's the ticking time bomb set to explode with more than 3,000 documents and 34,000 previously redacted files from sealed 54-year-old government files on JFK's assassination in Dallas are released from the National Archives on October the 26th. Okay, that's when they're going to be released. Okay? In other words, in 20 days from now. An archives employee who insists on remaining anonymous but is familiar with the files' explosive content tells the Globe, the papers spell out in detail how John and Robert Kennedy were prepared to fire Hoover in response to his prying into John's findings, including Marilyn Monroe and the president's mafia connections. Hoover would never tolerate such a humiliation, so he had JFK killed on November the 26th, 1963. The details of his plot were sealed by the Warren Commission, which homosexual lawman, quote, used his dossiers to extort the commissioners to bury the truth, end quote, the source says. But the FBI czar didn't have as much luck with JFK. After bugging Monroe's Hollywood bungalow and taping her trysts with the Kennedy brothers, Hoover confronted the president, who'd decided not to extend the top cop's time in office. Interesting. Hoover threatened to go public with the Monroe tapes. JFK's fling with mafia mole Judith Exner and his behind-the-scenes contacts with gang lords Sam Momo Giancana and Johnny Rosselli. Quote, but Kennedy called Hoover's bluff and produced photos of the FBI boss dressed in drag, end quote, says the source. However, Hoover was told to have his office cleared out by December the 31st, 1963. And of course, a little bit more than a month before that, JFK, of course, was assassinated. However, Hoover struck first and rubbed out JFK. Now the secrets due to be exposed in October will finally shatter the myth. A lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, cut down JFK, the Mole says. The records will reveal Hoover ordered retired G-Man William Guy Bannister to recruit Oswald as a patsy to cover up JFK's murder by a Cuban hit squad recruited by the FBI, says the source. Bannister was a legendary FBI agent who was part of the team that took down 30s bank robber John Dillinger. In 1963, he was running a private eye firm out of 544 Camp Street in New Orleans. In a strange coincidence, Oswald operated his Fair Play for Cuba committee from that same address. Oswald's office was on the other side of the building, but Bannister's secretary, Delphine Roberts, noted Oswald, quote, seemed to be on familiar terms with Bannister and with Bannister's office, end quote. The files will also confirm continuous rumors. The Bureau paid Oswald $200 a month to be, quote, an undercover FBI snitch, end quote, says a JFK expert. Quote, they will change history, end quote. The files are the last pieces of the 5 million plus documents, photos, motion pictures, sound recordings, and artifacts Congress ordered locked away in a single storage vault in Washington, D.C. in the Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act. The act ordered the National Archives to publicly release all remaining items by October the 26th this year, 2017. Quote, the only person who can stop the release, okay, is President Donald Trump, and he has shown no inclination to do so, end quote, says the source. Quote, however, I am aware the FBI is furiously lobbying him, end quote. That is from The Globe on the 28th of August, 2017. Okay? Here you see all the screenshots. Again, here is the cover page. FBI boss J. Edgar Hoover killed Kennedy, exposed top secret files buried for 54 years. Okay? For those that want these screenshots, you could just basically go to my website, but you'd have to cut and paste this article's title, and it's in Greek. But I will be releasing one in English within the next hour or so. Okay? This is an exclusive from our website, GreekNewsOnDemand.com. We publish in Greek, but we also publish in English. So you can check out our 2 special English article sections here. And also just go to our main feed and just sort through them. And there you'll see tons of English articles that we publish. We specialize, of course, in Greek news and getting the truth out about, ladies and gentlemen, the Greek economic crisis, which Donald Trump is continuing to perpetrate against the Greek people. And he has done absolutely nothing about this conspiracy, this crime committed against the Greeks that's been ongoing for at least 7 years now. And behind it, of course, is the IMF. And the IMF, for those that don't know, okay, the International Monetary Fund, in other words, that is a top Rothschild bank that works together with the World Bank. And recently, about a month ago, I met a Chinese banker from Hong Kong here in LA. And he also happens to be an official at the World Bank. And he, basically, when I started speaking with him about all this kind of stuff, about conspiracy, about the New World Order, his ears perked up and he was very interested in listening. And he showed me his badge from the World Bank, and he says, I need more good information on this. And I said, just read my book, Hellenic Crisis, by John Contreras. It is on smashwords.com, also on Amazon's Kindle. There you'll find all the real evidence on what went on, basically, with the Greek economic crisis. Okay? So I'll show you some links to that a little bit later. So going back to basically Donald Trump, he's not going to basically do anything. He's not going to make America great again. He's not going to help Greece, which founded Western civilization. He's going to carry out the Jew World Order's plan to destroy America and the rest of the world. And that's what he's already doing. I mean, if you watch my previous video here on YouTube, he's at a press conference this morning in Washington, and he's saying crazy things like, I feel like a storm is coming, he says. I feel like, a storm is on its way, right? And everyone's like, what the heck are you talking about? And, he was just laughing, and he just blew them all off. But of course, this was all said within the context of war with Korea. So what I like to do is now make the connection between JFK's assassination, okay, and Donald Trump. Okay? Yes, you heard that correctly. There is a connection between JFK's assassination and Donald Trump. Now, for all the people out there who, have said things like, oh, they're going to assassinate Trump like they did Kennedy. They may very well assassinate him, quote unquote, but it's all going to be fake. I mean, there's all these hints that, for the past year or more, that's what they're going to do, meaning the Illuminati against Trump, okay? We know all that by now. And speaking of Las Vegas, it was in November of last year, if you recall, where Trump was at some political gathering and some crazy white guy with supposedly a weapon on him starts moving through the crowd and threatening Trump, and then they had to usher Trump immediately off the stage. That was in Vegas, speaking of Vegas. So, they very well may stage his assassination. And it wasn't a fluke, too, that Melania Trump was dressed as Jackie O during Trump's inauguration, and so on and so forth. Okay? So, let's make the connection now, and you're going to see basically now that, this portion that I'm describing to you right now, okay, of all the National Archives files on JFK's death, okay, is never going to be released. And it has to do, basically, it may be released, I don't know. I don't think it will. And I'm going to describe to you why. But if it's released, it's going to really shed damning light on the government, on each successive government since JFK's time in office. It's going to show how the government, the FBI, killed JFK. It's going to show how J. Edgar Hoover, just as I just read to you, played a huge role in this, and so on and so forth. And it wasn't just JFK. I'm sorry, J. Edgar Hoover. I get them all mixed up. J. Edgar Hoover. It wasn't just him. It was George W. Bush, it was Nixon, it was E. Howard Hunt, and it was the Jewish Mafia. Yes, you heard that correctly, which I'm going to get into right now. And Michael Collins Piper, by the way, wrote the book Final Judgment. He gets into the Israeli connection, Jewish connection with JFK's assassination. So you can check out that book. You'll find a free PDF copy, I believe, online. Final Judgment by Michael Collins Piper. He's the number one. Okay, he was the number one. He passed away 2 years ago, just about 2 years ago or more. Okay, he was pretty young, about 54 years old. Journalist of the American Free Press and so on and so forth. His death was under mysterious circumstances, but he had said, though, in previous broadcasts of his, because he had a radio show, that his health wasn't good and things of that sort. And many people in the 9/11 Truth Movement, many people that support his work said that his health wasn't good and he wasn't really assassinated. So, anyway, he was a great guy. If you just type in his name, Michael Collins Piper, on YouTube, you'll see all his old broadcasts. He was a former journalist of the American Free Press. He was a fantastic author and journalist. And he was also the guy back in 2004, listen to this, who, oddly enough, during that time, dug up some old files from the Spotlight magazine from the 1970s. The Spotlight magazine, I don't know if it's still around, but was a very credible journal at that time. So in their October 1978 edition, they talk about how Donald Trump, listen to this, at that time in 1978, he had bought up his first casino interest in Vegas. He bought 93% of the shares of Resorts International, which in the past belonged to the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. Yes, you heard that correctly. Belonged to the Rothschilds and to the Rockefellers. Okay, all you got to do is just type in Google right now, Michael Collins Piper, the Spotlight, 1978, Donald Trump, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and you'll see it all. Okay? So, the article goes on to say how the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers used the CIA and the Israeli Mossad to run it as a, get this, company, basically, by which to launder, drug money and money from various different illegal activities. Uh-huh. Yes, you heard that correctly. So, there's your president for you. That was written in 1978, by the way. Michael Collins Piper published that in 2004 in his blog. So he's a very key figure to understanding the connection between the Jewish mafia and the assassination of JFK. Now, let's make that the connection with the Jewish mafia and JFK with, of course, Donald Trump and his mentor, Roy Cohn, who was the former head of the Jewish mafia in New York, who was a homosexual. He died of AIDS, and according to many reports from like the 70s and 80s and on, he ran a pedophile ring out of his house, okay, and in New York, and he used it as a way to blackmail politicians to get his way. He was a high-powered attorney in New York, and he supported all the mafiosos over there, both the Jews and the Italians and so on and so forth. Okay? All of this is very well documented. All you got to do is Google it and research it for yourself. So, let's make that connection out. Let's go to an article that was published in 1996. Notice all these dates I'm giving to you. This is stuff that's been published decades ago, okay? In 1996 by Lyndon LaRouche, who's a very famous, credible journalist in Washington, okay? Let's go to that article here, and this is going to just blow your mind. Okay. This is from his site, LaRouchePub.com, as you can see on your screen, LaRouchePub.com. And I have the section here that I want to talk about. And here's the title, though. Here's the title. This is from his news agency, EIR, Volume 23, November the 29th. I'm sorry, number 29, July the 19th, 1996. The title, The Roy Cohn Mob and, quote, Dirty Dick, end quote, Morris. This gets into Dick Morris and the mob. This is very, very interesting. And, you know, it's just so much to go over right now. I'm going to try to go over some key parts here. The Roy Cohn story, it says here, and by extension, the Dirty Dick, quote-unquote, Morris story, reveals just how close some of America's most respected, quote, citizens above suspicion, end quote, are the lowest gutters of organized crime and dope trafficking. Among the list of Cohn's employers and protectors were the Anglophile power brokers John Foster Dulles and his younger brother Alan Dulles and John Foster's protege Thomas Dewey. The Dulles brothers and Dewey assembled the American end of the British-Canadian-US grouping of the bloodiest assassins and the fanciest gentlemen. Okay? In this political brothel, Roy Cohn was a queen, and Dick Morris learned the trade of intrigue and duplicity. Okay? As Secretary of State and CIA Director, respectively, John Foster and Alan Dulles had protected and managed Roy Cohn's most flagrant adventurism as Joe McCarthy's counsel. John Foster warned U.S. diplomats in 1953 to spare no effort in spurring Cohn's witch hunt. Yet publicly, John Foster Dulles denounced the despicable Cohn at every opportunity, and undoubtedly found Cohn a thoroughly foul, albeit politically useful person. In 1957, a leading member of the Dulles-Dewey apparatus, Dulles' former law partner, New York State Judge David W. Peck, personally arranged for Roy Cohn to be taken into the old-line New York Democratic Party law firm Sachs, Bacon, and O'Shea. Judge Peck soon resigned the bench and rejoined the Dulles brothers' firm, Sullivan and Cromwell, while Cohn immediately made Sachs, Bacon into the New York nerve center for the criminal mafia assembled by Dulles and Dewey. Assembled by Dulles and Dewey. This is very key, because this is all going to connect now with the JFK assassination. Of course, the Dulles brothers played a role in that too. Okay? So, let's go now to page 80, all right, of the same publication. Here it says the Kennedy assassination. In 1958, just after being installed at Sachs Bacon by the Dulles-Dewey apparatus, Roy Cohn became president of Lionel Corporation, the famous manufacturer of toy trains. Montreal crime boss Joseph Bonanno became Lionel's chairman. That same year, Major Louis Mortimer Bloomfield, a wartime British intelligence officer in the Special Operations Executive and attorney for the Montreal-based Brafman family, incorporated the Permanent Industrial Expositions Company, known as Permandex, with himself as president and chairman. Okay? Major Bloomfield and Roy Cohn were both intimates of, let's scroll down here, J. Edgar Hoover. Isn't that something? J. Edgar Hoover. Now, what I want to point out too, by the way, is Alex Jones's lawyer. Okay, one of his high-powered lawyers belongs to the Bronfman family. Yes, you heard that correctly. Alex Jones from InfoWars. Google it. So let's look at this here on the screen. The Roy Cohn machine. Look at that. At the top left-hand corner, we have Meyer Lansky connected with Lucky Luciano. Meyer Lansky was the head of the Jewish mafia way back then, like in the 40s, 50s, 60s. He's connected with the Bronfmans. Okay? He's also connected with Lewin Rosenthal. The Bronfmans over here on the left are connected with Alan Bloomfield, British intelligence, and with J. Edgar Hoover. Louis Rosenthal, however you pronounce that, is connected with Kathy Rosenthal, who's connected with James Finkelstein, who's connected with Roy Cohn, and so on and so forth. They're all connected. Just look at this. All right? So, let's scroll down here. So as we read from the top here, Major Bloomfield and Roy Cohn were both intimates of J. Edgar Hoover. Interesting. Since World War II, Bloomfield had been a British intelligence liaison to Hoover, with oversight responsibilities for FBI Division 5 counterintelligence. And since Cohn's, quote, red hunting, end quote, days, Cohn had maintained intimate political and personal relations with Hoover. Gee, what does that mean? The two of them also reportedly sharing sex with their mutual financial sponsor, Shenley's president, Lewin Rosenthal. What? Oh, that is just utterly freaking disgusting. But yet, this is from a very credible journal, ladies and gentlemen. EIR, which belongs to the well-known journalist Lyndon LaRouche. Yes, you heard that all correctly. Let's go down. Personnel working for Roy Cohn and Joe Bonanno at Lionel's Corp, Texas subsidiary, International Control Corp, are identified in a buried citation in the Warren Commission report on the assassination of President Kennedy as having worked in New Orleans in conjunction with Bloomfield's Permandex operatives on matters which would soon come before the world with terrifying force. In that period, Roy Cohn was increasingly placed under suspicion and investigation by Robert Kennedy, who became U.S. Attorney General in 1961. Continuing. President Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. The Warren Commission announced that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone perpetrator of a senseless crime, but New Orleans District Attorney James Garrison pointed to the Montreal-based Permandex organization as the planners and perpetrators of the JFK murder. The world's attention was focused on Garrison's prosecution of Permandex board member and prominent New Orleans socialite and Anglophile Clay Shaw for conspiracy to murder the president. Garrison's prosecution came under brutal attack from the Dulles forces and from Kennedy's own national security advisor, McGeorge Bundy. Okay? So, J. Lee Rankin, partner of Dewey and the Dulleses in creating the World Peace Through Law Group, had been the executive director and general counsel of the Warren Commission. Interesting. Rankin ran all aspects of the official federal inquiry into the president's murder. That's putting the fox to guard the henhouse. And all contacts between the Warren Commission and its staff went through Rankin. Rankin was the Warren Commission's liaison to Hoover's FBI and to the Central Intelligence Agency, whose former director, Allen Dulles, President Kennedy had fired. Okay? It was only as a result of the suppression of two critical pieces of evidence during the 1969 New Orleans trial that Clay Shaw avoided conviction for the conspiracy to assassinate President Kennedy. Had Shaw been convicted, and here's the punchline, the entire edifice of murder and cover-up would have come crashing down, and the role of Bloomfield, Cohn, etc., listen to this, etc., in the JFK assassination would have been the subject of worldwide attention. The Dulles-Rankin Warren Commission fraud would have been thoroughly exposed. So the Dulleses and Rankin controlled the Warren Commission. And thus you have the 100% connection between, JFK's assassination and Donald Trump's own former mentor, Roy Cohn. There you have it. Okay, there's your president involved in JFK's own freaking assassination. Gee, do you think he's going to release all these files that I just mentioned to you with regards to JFK's assassination? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to happen. Do you really think Donald Trump will release files, ladies and gentlemen, that implicate J. Edgar Hoover in the JFK assassination and so on and so forth? Of course, there's various reasons why JFK was probably assassinated, okay? If he was assassinated. That's another issue. And there's tons of videos out there, including from the channel Russian Vids, who's one of my favorite. He's a friend of mine, and we put him on Greek TV a couple times, where he analyzes the Zapruder tape and all that crap, and he says JFK was never assassinated because how is a U.S. president who belongs to the Illuminati going to be assassinated? Okay? That's his take on it. Okay, I mean, if he wants to believe it, that's his prerogative. Do I believe it? With regards to this point, I guess maybe I would. But to me, there's more serious issues at hand with JFK's assassination. This is what I'm getting at. And that is, that Donald Trump's own freaking mentor was involved in this. A guy who was a filthy, demonic character and was head of the Jewish mafia. How come no one's ever talking about this? A few publications have written about this in the past year or two, particularly during Trump's whole campaign, but there hasn't been written enough. That's my point. Let's just take a look real quick on the screen. Donald Trump and Roy Cohn. So that you can get a picture of in your mind basic about what I'm talking about. So let's go to YouTube. And of course you could just Google it too, but because we live in a YouTube age, let's just go to YouTube. So basically what you have is, as this loads, because I know I'm using a lot of programs right now. What you have is a clear connection between Roy Cohn and the people that assassinated JFK. Roy Cohn, right? Donald Trump. Mafia. Okay? Now, Trump's greatest mentor was red baiting aide to Joseph McCarthy and attorneys for NYC mob families. Trump's mob ties exposed, and so on and so forth. Here you go. It's all here. What Donald Trump learned from Roy Cohn, and so on and so forth. Okay? So just check those out. I'm just giving that to you for reference sake. Okay? Now, You can also Google it too. Tons of publications have been published about this. I mean, this is just crazy. So, in view of all this, what is Trump going to do? I don't think he's going to do anything because JFK, J. Edgar Hoover, ties in with Roy Cohn, with Permindex, with Rankin, with the Dulles brothers, and so on and so forth. Donald Trump knows all this. Donald Trump's mentor was Roy Cohn. Donald Trump became rich because of Roy Cohn's help. That's all very well documented for decades now. So we'll have to wait and see. So, in about 20 days from now, the National Archives is going to basically release all this stuff. Again, a special section of this already released archive, which is over 3,000 files, okay, which has to do with J. Edgar Hoover's role in assassinating JFK, John F. Kennedy. Okay? This has not been released yet. The only person right now who could stop this is none other than Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. So we'll have to wait and see. What is he going to do? I'm going to make a bet he's not going to allow it to be released. Do you really think that the establishment, do you really think that the deep state is going to allow such damning information to be released? This is going to basically now confirm the decades-long, conspiracy theorists' views that JFK was assassinated by the government, so on and so forth. Do you really think that the president government who's tied in with this is going to allow this to happen? Of course not. We'll have to wait and see. So, that was our nice, interesting little tidbit find for the day, wasn't it? For those who don't know me, I am John Kontouris, Greek-American journalist. I appear both on Greek TV and on Greek radio, both here in the United States and in Greece. Yes, I am tied in with mainstream news media, but anytime I get on, I always speak the truth. I expose the New World Order, especially in relation to Greece. This basically has become a full-time job for me, and this is what I've devoted my whole life to. Okay? So, I get on a lot of alternative news networks too, and speak, that are on YouTube and elsewhere. So I'm very well entrenched in the fight against the New World Order, exposing all aspects of it. All right. So if you'd like to check out, by the way, my 2 books, and I want to put that on the screen, by the way, to support my work. Let me pull these up real quick. The first one is Hellenic Crisis by John Kontouris. You can find this on Amazon. It's $10. So here it is. Hellenic Crisis, a conspiracy against the Greek people by John Kontouris. So basically exposes all the particulars with regards to the economic crisis. This is a crime committed against Greek people by the IMF in conjunction with the then Greek government, George Papandreou, who is a crypto Jew, who's part of the New World Order, who's the head of the International Social Organization. They did it in order to basically destroy the Greek people, their way of life, their culture, the Greek Orthodox faith, which is the true version of Christian orthodoxy, is the true version of the Christian faith, period. Okay? This gets into all of it. Now, for those who don't understand this, especially for those who are Protestant Christian or maybe Catholic, trust me, you'll like my book. Now, for those, though, that don't know the role, basically, don't know, basically, the fact that it was the fall of the Byzantine Empire, the great Christian Greek Byzantine Empire, that created the onset of the New World Order. Okay? For those who do not know that yet, you might want to read this book too. Your Academic Guide to the Greek Language, Culture, and Civilization. Okay? Let me try to pull this up here. And Civilization. That's by, again, yours truly, John Kontouris. I wrote this book to talk about the fact that, it was Martin Luther himself who said that the best version of the church was the Greek model. He sent his own disciples, his own followers, to study orthodoxy under the Greeks in Constantinople. Okay? He learned a lot from the Greeks, and the Reformers, of course, took on a more orthodox form of Christianity, and the Reformers, of course, still exist today. Why is it that Protestants are not talking about this? Okay? If you read this book, you will learn all of that. You will learn about the greatness and the power of the Greek people, their culture, their history, their language. If you want to learn Greek, ancient Greek, read this book, because it will teach you all the secrets on how to learn ancient Greek very quickly, very effectively. This is recognized by Professor Ben Shin, by theological and Greek professor Ben Shin from Talbot University, okay, which is the theological section of Biola University here in La Mirada, California. He's a friend of mine. So, you will learn about how the New World Order basically created the fall of the Byzantine Empire, okay? And that, of course, was the onset of the then form of the New World Order, which has led to the New World Order of today. We talk about how the black nobility of Venice, for example, which was controlled by very powerful Jewish interests, helped the Ottoman Empire to overthrow the Greek Christian Byzantine Empire, which led to 400 years of slavery for the Greek people, and so on and so forth. Okay, this is very, very key. And there you're just going to learn basically from the best sources of mine that the reason why the New World Order still exists today is because of the destruction, not only of Christianity, but the destruction of Orthodox Christianity in particular, of the Byzantine Empire, of all former satellite states of the Byzantine Empire, like, Serbia. Remember what happened in Kosovo in 1998? We're talking about one of the last satellite states of the Greek Christian Byzantine Empire, ladies and gentlemen. All these nations fell under the Byzantine Empire. They're part of our empire. They learn Greek, they learn Orthodoxy from us Greeks. This is a 100% fact. Now, my sources are Eustace Mullins and many other great sources. Who was Eustace Mullins? He was the greatest New World Order researcher of all time. He was the last protege of Ezra Pound, and he provided to us the best books on the New World Order, on the Zionist Jewish role in the New World Order. He also, by the way, just so happened to be, now listen to this, a top member of the McCarthy Commission in the 1950s. As a matter of fact, it was basically Mullins himself, Eustace Mullins, who woke up McCarthy, giving him a 40-page report on all the communist activities in America and how they tied in with the Jews, and so on and so forth. That's why McCarthy flipped out, went crazy, quote-unquote, and basically started exposing all the Reds in Washington, right? Well, what most people don't know is that a little bit down the road, about maybe, I think it was a few years later, this is, I think, 1959, I can't remember exactly when he formed the committee. Was it from 54 to 55? I'll have to look that up. But when Mullins joined the committee, that's when the committee flourished. But what happened was, very powerful Jewish interests there in Washington got a hold of the Warren Commission, got a hold of the McCarthy Commission, excuse me. And it was a young lawyer by the name of Roy Cohn who basically, with his power and influence, and with his boyfriend, yes, you heard that correctly, whose name I can't remember right now, put pressure on McCarthy so that he would allow them, particularly Roy Cohn, to join the commission. What? Jews joining the McCarthy Commission? I mean, McCarthy was speaking all against the Jews, right? Yeah, that's the paradox here. But see, these guys who were connected with the Anti-Defamation League, Roy Cohn's father was head of the ADL. Imagine that. The most evil, oppressive, psychotic Jewish organization pretty much ever, along, of course, with the Jewish lobby and you name it. So, here you have Roy Cohn with his power and influence becoming a part of the McCarthy Commission, which is a total freaking oxymoron, to say the least. All right? So after a while, he realizes that Eustace Mullins is a very powerful influence, that he obviously doesn't like communists and Jews. And Roy Cohn, who was really a closet communist, although he pretended he was a Jew against communism, he was conservative, and he was for McCarthy's efforts. In reality, he wasn't. And that's what Jews like to do. They play both sides of the fence. They act like they're this and that. It doesn't matter. And in the end of the day, though, it doesn't matter if they're conservative, if they're liberal, if they're communist, or whatever. in the end of the day, they will all support each other because that's the whole nature of the Jew World Order beast. They play both sides of the fence. They like to espouse other religions. They like to create other religions. Okay? They've created a whole gigantic psycho monster religion called Protestant Christianity. Okay? Protestant Christianity. Now, there's a lot of branches of Protestantism that are nice, that are sincere, that expose the New World Order. I know that. You don't need to tell me that. But if you read, though, Martin Luther's own notes, his own books, he wrote 2 books against the Jews. He said that they who act like they're oppressed by all humanity are really our lords and masters, right? If you read how he fought against them because he understood that they were controlling the Vatican, particularly the Medici family, who was a crypto-Jewish family, okay, then you'll understand basically what I'm saying here. In other words, Martin Luther exposed all this, and that's the reason why they assassinated him. And you can look this all up. There's been tons of books and articles over the years, over the probably centuries, that have been written about all this. Eustace Mullins wrote about this in his book, Mullins' New History of the Jews. Very powerful book. Check that out. Okay? Google these terms, I'm telling you. You'll find it. He talked about how Martin Luther exposed the Jews in the Vatican. So, in 1936, the Anti-Defamation League and other Jewish organizations, listen to this, because this is going to blow your mind. They had an official conference in Paris. It was Anti-Defamation League, B'nai B'rith, and other powerful Jewish organizations. They had a conference in Paris, and they said, quote, in their minutes of the conference, okay, they said that Martin Luther came too close to exposing our plans. So we had to get rid of him. He understood that we Jews controlled Catholicism and Christianity pretty much in general. So that's precisely the reason why we had to kill him. They bragged about this. They talked about this openly. I mean, my God. Do Protestant Christians basically know this? Okay? Now, there's tons of Protestant Christians out there who are exposing the New World Order, who are exposing the Zionist connection with the New World Order, and that's good. And I applaud them and I support them. But there's still too many out there millions out there that support Israel, and they think the Jews are God's chosen people and all that garbage. Read my 2 books, Hellenic Crisis and Your Academic Guide to the Greek Language, Culture, and Civilization, and you'll find out all the truth about this. Trust me, when I say all the truth, I mean all the truth. So, for example, the church never taught for 2,000 years that the Jews were God's chosen people, ladies and gentlemen. It was always the church that was God's chosen people. Yes, replacement theology is real. Yes, that is valid. The church fathers created replacement theology like Saint Clement. It was like 125 AD when he came out and he said that. The church has always taught this. The Orthodox Church, for nearly 2,000 years, okay, has woven in their liturgy, in their teachings, that the church is the new Jerusalem, the new Israel, and so on and so forth. Okay? So, when the Jews created this monster, distorted version of Protestant Christianity and veered it away from its Orthodox roots, because remember, Martin Luther and his followers were tending to go along with the Orthodox Church. Remember that. Okay? The way that the Jews were able to do this, ladies and gentlemen, is they were able to get a hold of some very powerful, prominent figures in world Jewry who were tied in with Christianity, namely John Cohen, better known as John Calvin, to basically take over Protestant Christianity after the assassination by Martin Luther, which, again, they bragged about committing. Okay? The Anti-Defamation League and the B'nai B'rith said this in their official conference in Paris in 1936. Look it up. Of course, continuing with the same minutes of the same conference, they also made mention to John Cohen. better known as John Calvin, and said clearly that he was their agent. Gee, isn't that interesting? Because today there's so many Protestant Christians out there who think John Calvin was this great reformer, this great Protestant, this blah, 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 la, la, la. Just read my book, Your Academic Guide to the Greek Language, Culture, and Civilization. I will explain all this. I will show you how it is. If there were to be a race of people that are God's chosen people, it's the Greeks. Yes, you heard that correctly, because Paul the Apostle was sent to call to the Greeks. And when the Bible talks about that the gospel is first to the Jews and then to the Greeks, that is a complete twisted, distorted translation. It doesn't say that in the ancient Greek. It says the gospel was formerly for the Jews, the real Israelites. Not for these fake, Khazarian Jews of today. 95% of the Jews today have zero, basically, Semitic blood on them. That has been documented over and over again, basically, by historians throughout the ages, for hundreds and hundreds of years, by the way. And when I say hundreds and hundreds of years, yes, you heard that correctly. All the nations of the earth for hundreds and hundreds of years have said that the Khazars are the successors of the true Israelite Jews. They took over for them, it was like 740 AD, and thought they were now God's chosen people. Okay? Today we call them the Ashkenazi. And so on and so forth. So in the ancient Greek, this scripture says the gospel is formerly to the Jews, the real Jews, the Israelites, but has now been wholly committed to the Greeks. That's what it says. Is it any wonder that Jesus Christ gave his last revelation to the Greek churches? In Ephesus, Cappadocia, Alexandria, and so on and so forth? Huh? Is it any wonder that the Greeks took over Christianity 100%? And then, of course, after the Edict of Milan, Constantine transferred the capital of Rome to Byzantium, which he then termed after himself by renaming it Constantinople, which means Constantine's city. And for 1100 years, the Greeks ruled and reigned the whole world. The greatest empire ever on the face of the earth. No, that wasn't the Middle Ages. No, that wasn't the Dark Ages. Nincompoops out there who like to pull the Greeks in together with the Catholic Church and, of course, with the Dark Ages. That is... If you believe that, then you've been brainwashed by mainstream education, media, by the government. You know absolutely nothing about Christianity and church history. The reason why the world is plunged into darknesses and wars is because of the fall of the Byzantine Empire in 1453. And then when John Cohen, better known as John Calvin, took over Protestantism, the Jews were able to use the Protestants to create the most bloodiest evil wars ever in Europe. That is a fact. I'm not going to get into doctrinal issues with you. That's another issue, and I'll do another tape on that. I'll do another recording on that. But my point is that the reason why the world is in the shape it is in today, the reason why there's a New World Order, the reason why Europe fell into communism, the reason why this all started with revolutions, the French Revolution, the Greek Revolution, and so on and so forth, 1789 and 1821 respectively, is because of these very powerful Jewish conspirators who were funded by the Rothschilds, who were all Freemasons, who connected with Freemasonic networks around the world. They all got together, they conspired to overthrow monarchies, okay? Christian monarchies around the world, and so on and so forth. And when the Christian monarchies fell, that's when Christian Europe began to fall. And then, of course, they completed this job by murdering, and this is very key here, the last Christian Byzantine emperor, Tsar Nicholas II, in Russia. In 1918, the Jewish Bolsheviks brutally murdered the Tsar. With the funding from the Rothschilds, from Kumlo Bank in New York, and of course with U.S. taxpayer dollar funding with the signature of Woodrow Wilson, then President of the United States. Isn't that something? So, the forces today that control Trump, my point is, to sum this all up, are these very same forces that I'm describing to you now. They are basically the Jew World Order. Trump received funding from the fricking Jewish mafia Last year, $25 million from the big media and casino mogul. Read something, I can't remember his name right now. Just Google it, look it up, you'll find it. Trump's former mentor, Roy Cohn, was the head of the Jewish mafia. According to Bloomberg News in 1992, Donald Trump began to receive funding from the Rothschilds in the late 80s from Rothschild Incorporated Bank. The connection between Trump and the Rothschilds was a banker in that same bank named Wilbur Ross. In the 1980s, Wilbur Ross began to give Donald Trump funding for his already faltering casinos. So this guy who is involved with the mob and has casinos in Vegas is going to tell us what happened in Vegas, when in reality it was this very same mob who pulled off what they did the other day. Even though, of course, it was fake, albeit it was fake. Okay? Meant to take away our guns and so on and so forth. We know that already. Us who have our eyes wide open. Not wide shut, but wide open. I hope that makes sense. So, Donald Trump began to receive funding from Wilbur Ross. An interesting fact, though, is this, that in, I think it was April or May of 2016, last year, it was none other than Mr. Wilbur Ross who came out and supported Trump's candidacy. Thus, the connection between Trump's election and the Rothschilds. You've been listening to the news from GreekNewsOnDemand.com. Please visit our website today. Thank you for listening. God bless you. Spread this video ever. Upload it. It's yours. Take care.